I want to bring in the man of the hour, Laith Marouf. Laith Marouf is an award-winning multimedia producer and broadcaster and law consultant. Laith, Happy New Year, man. Welcome to the show.
Happy New Year's to you and your loved ones. Thank you for having me, Jamal.
Oh, man, always appreciate having you. Laith, I want to start off with your assessment and analysis, kind of a larger analysis of where we are in 2025 as we begin this year in the Middle East. And you could start wherever you want to start with that, but I just want to get your appraisal, your take to start the year off. What is going on from your take in regards to international politics in relation to the Middle East?
Well, for the first time in 82 years, practically all the Arabic states are under American Western control and or partial control. Syria was the first country in the world to gain its independence through a revolution at the end of World War II in 1942. And now, as we see all the Arabic republics that revolted against the monarchies the West installed during the world wars, are back under American control, save for partially Yemen, and who knows if Algeria is actually still fully independent or not, or back under French influence. But if you look at the map, this is where we at. And for the first time since 1948, all the countries adjacent to Palestine are now either fully under American control and or partial control, like Lebanon, that has only a resistance and a government and a military that is under American control.
Do you expect resistant movements in Syria to ignite? And let me explain why I asked that. Right now, you had a situation for a country that was religiously independent. They, Christians, Alawites, across the board, people can worship whatever they wanted to worship. And all at once, you get a Turkish, U.S., Israeli-backed invasion, and at this point, occupation, where they effectively just said, we have one God, and we're going to worship in one very specific way. And you have other groups, Alawites, Christians, being persecuted right now that the West is pretending is a democracy, in the way that they're casting this in propagandistic terms. By the same token, though, you can see how the Christians, the Alawites, even other Muslim groups do not like what is taking place on the ground. And you would imagine that with the amount of persecution that these groups are getting, are they going to, let's say, cobble together some element of Syria in order to push back? Do you expect that to take place? Or what are your expectations for 2025 in relation to Syria?
Well, there's already armed resistance active on the ground. We saw the formations of militias in the coastal cities and the mountain range on the coast that are, call themselves a new National Liberation Front. And at the same time, we saw yesterday the Suwaida region in the south, where it is mainly Druze, have appointed a female governor to Suwaida, and put in checkpoints across all the entrances to the province, and are refusing to allow the HTS terrorist government to come in. So this is just, in the first month since the takeover of Damascus, as we see, things are going in the direction of that. And, maybe it is partially what the West also wants, to have these ethnic and or religious-based enclaves that are statelets, and to break down Syria into a country, multiple countries that are unable to sustain themselves and be sovereigns financially, economically, militarily. But even in the vast heartland of the country that is mostly Sunni, everybody should know that the majority, something like 85% of all Muslims, Sunnis in Syria, are of the Sufi, meaning mystic sects. They do not belong to the orthodox schools of Sunni Islam, and which means that very small part of the Muslim population follows, let's say, the ideas of the Muslim Brotherhood and or the Wahhabi sect, and that's not going to bode well for the HTS. There's some information coming out that people are seeing in the West of attacks on Alawi shrines and or Christian churches and Christian sites, but the vast majority of attacks on religious, churches or whatever you want to call them, religious houses, are on Sunni mosques, where these HTS Wahhabi death squads are walking into these Sufi mosques and beating and lynching the preachers and appointing Wahhabi preachers instead of them. So this is not going to even last as a stability situation within the Muslim population, Sunni population. So the country is definitely going to birth resistance. Syrian people see themselves as inheritors of 10,000, 12,000 years of history, and have markers in that history that always give them strength against occupation. And we see the West trying to erase those things as fast as possible. The newly appointed Wahhabi Minister of Education, for instance, is erasing from the history curriculum of the schools any reference to Zenobia, the queen of Palmyra, that rebelled against Rome and is the only recorded on history during the Roman rule, revolutionary secessionist movements that happened during that. And so we're seeing how they're trying to erase the history, but this is impossible to happen if there is the markers on the ground. And this is partially why ISIS attempted to destroy Palmyra, because Palmyra gives this historical anchor to the Syrian people about anti-colonialism, anti-imperialism, and sovereignty. Anyways, look, the West may have bitten more than it can chew by doing what it did in Syria. And Russia made a huge mistake agreeing to this deal. But in their hopes, in their mind, I think why Russia betrayed Syria this way is that even if the US reneges on giving it Ukraine in exchange for Syria, there will be so much resistance within Syria that it will drag the West for another 10 years in the region in wars. I think Russia looks at what happened over the last 30 years, and this is all people that are watching this should know. Without non-stop resistance by the Arabic peoples in this region against imperialism and colonialism since the end of World War II, the liberation of other parts of the world wouldn't have happened. Not to say that peoples in Vietnam or people in Latin America or others are not strong enough or don't have the conviction of liberation. They do. But because the West has been stuck in the Arabic world, fighting nonstop this, to crush Arabic people's spirit. Other regions in the world have a chance to escape, a better chance. And you can time it even in history. For instance, even the war in Vietnam, it coincided with the 1973 war where the West was investing all its military efforts to save the Zionist colony from the Egyptian-Syrian combined attack. And that's how Vietnam gets to be liberated. You look at the pink wave, whatever they call it, in Latin America, and it all happens as the West is embroiling itself in genocide in Iraq and multiple wars in the region and attacks on Somalia and others. And now today, this is what the Russians are calculating. The Russians and the Chinese know that if the Arabic people have given up a long time ago, after the collapse of the Soviet Union, for instance, China wouldn't have had 30 years to build its economy to become the largest in the world and so advanced, as the West couldn't fight it at that moment because it was stuck in the Arabic world. Similarly, Russia wouldn't have had the chance to rebuild its military capabilities and shore up its economy if the US was at its gates in Ukraine 30 years ago. Today, this is basically what the Russians are thinking. Let the Americans get stuck in another 15 years of war in the Middle East. And in that meanwhile, Russia will become the number one military power in the world.
Oh man, I don't understand your take on this, right? I don't see how. Let me say it this way: after the JCPOA, after the Minsk agreements, after the Istanbul agreements, I don't know why Russia would accept even if America offered something like that. I don't know why they would accept it. I don't know what they would get out of it, how they could even trust anything that is coming out of the West's mouth at this point. In fact, I go further. I think part of the dilemma, even in ending the Ukraine war, is how do you deal with a partner that lies constantly throughout? Now, if the point of view is, okay, well, let them digest Syria, because Syria is going to be a madhouse in regards to they've effectively put a terrorist in charge of a country, and that is not going to go well, and let them deal with the chaos of that as we deal and resolve our own issues. Maybe that's a level of deep politics. I don't trust the West. And because I don't trust them, I don't know why anybody else would either. I guess that's where I fall in this. I mean, for example, Israel. Look at the ceasefire that's supposed to be taking place in Lebanon. Israel is still bombing areas of Lebanon despite ceasefire, with the West basically turning a blind eye to what they're doing, knowing full well that they're violating the ceasefire completely and continuously. So you could be right. I just, that's a hard buy for me on the
Yeah.
whole.
Yeah. No, this is why I said this is not about them trusting the US.
It's
This
just
is
the
about
chaos.
about letting them, since the US is so interested in taking Syria, well, let them take it. Let's see how it's going to play out. And plus, this also emboldens the US right now to build up for an attack on Iran. And as we see, this is where it's going. The US is going to be stuck in the region for another 20, 30 years if it doesn't retreat before that. This is the best case scenario for the US if it continues on this direction of a total genocide of the Palestinian people, a total defeat of Arabic liberationist movements, and a total defeat of the axis of resistance, including Iran. This is a 20, 30-year project. That's the best case scenario. So Russia sees that as a way out. I would say one more thing is that yesterday, I was in the south of Lebanon. There was on a frontline village just on the border called Shaqra, and they were burying 12 martyrs. This little village has given 90 martyrs in the battle. We visited one man, an older man. 3 of his sons were killed in this fight, and they are all waiting for the end of the quote unquote ceasefire to return to hostilities. It's not going to stop. The Israelis, as you were saying, are still bombing Lebanon. As we were driving back from the south last night, they attacked 2 locations, huge explosions. In north of the Litani. It's not even in the south of Litani. Also, yesterday, Israel attacked Aleppo in Syria. A huge air raid, the second largest explosion that registered 2.5 on the Richter scale. The attack that happened the week after the fall of Damascus on Tartus on the coast. Some people are saying it's a nuclear attack. I'm not sure about that, but it left a 25-kilometer, meaning like 20-mile radius crater in the mountain in Tartus, and registered 3.5 on the Richter scale. So are the Israelis using tactical nukes, or are the Americans using tactical nukes? I don't know. We've already moved past many things that we thought we will never see happening, right?
Yeah.
And this is also a kind of an indication of what's going to happen in Iran. If the US and the Israelis want to attack Iran, they're going to need to use tactical nukes, the least of it, to go through these huge mountains in Iran to get to the caches. So we're heading towards a war. We're already in a war unlike any since World War II.
Yeah, I often get this feeling that this is a third war in the making, where they're using proxies as opposed to directly engaging. And I'm glad you brought up Iran. So some of the reporting came out. Of course, earlier they were talking about Donald Trump having this pressure campaign against Iran. But apparently, recently, Axios reported that Joe Biden was looking at military options against hitting Iran, that Jake Sullivan came down, said, here's our options in case Iran moves towards a nuclear bomb. Iran, for its part, said, look, this pressure campaign is not going to work. We're willing to negotiate on another, I guess, JCPOA Part 2, which, again, goes to the whole trust thing of how can you trust them if they were willing to get rid of the first one. Do you think it was a mistake for Iran not to be more aggressive when the Houthis and the Lebanese or the Hezbollah and all of these groups were actually offering resistance? Do you think Iran should have been more aggressive in getting involved, and that it was a mistake in waiting because now they're effectively isolated with Israel and the U.S. teaming up against Iran without Syrian air defense to offer any resistance at all in any kind of bombing raid that they'll run against Iran? It seems like if they're going to hit Iran anyway, then it's somewhat of a mistake for Iran to not have engaged when everyone else was engaging. Give me your thoughts on that.
Yeah, there was a lot of strategic mistakes that happened from the axis of resistance over the last 15 years. And it's good to air them out. It's not something to hide if we want to analyze correctly and for the future. I think the mistakes started after the assassination of General Qasem Soleimani, which we are right now. Yesterday was the commemoration of 5 years since his assassination at the hand of Trump. When the assassination happened, Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, immediately in a speech the day after, called for a full war to expel the American presence from the region. And he was ready for it. This was a very good friend of his that was in the trenches together in the 2006 war and others. And unfortunately, the Iranian government decided to do that attack on Ain al-Assad military base that is symbolic. And, since Trump saw that this is all, and the whole empire, including its Zionist components, so that the Iranians will throw 200 missiles, give us 2 hours a heads up so we can move our assets and our big guys that as the only response to killing their biggest hero of Iran, the defeater of ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria and Iraq, that saved the holy sites of Najaf and Karbala in Iraq, and the holy sites around Damascus that are now being desecrated. So once that happened, I think the whole empire, and including its Zionist component, thought that, well, we can do anything we want to now. And we should never expect more than 200 missiles on empty bases as a response. So the mistake goes way back then as a strategic mistake. Now, when the genocide started, or when the Al-Aqsa flood was launched by Hamas without consultation with the rest of the axis of resistance or a heads up, yes, maybe the other parts of the axis of resistance were not ready to go out into full war, but we saw Hezbollah in Lebanon launched by the second day a beginnings of, and they had to reorganize themselves, redeploy, bring, if they want to go into a full war, that means a invasion and a liberation of North Palestine. And I think they were getting ready for that. The pager terrorist attack was mainly directed, yes, there was a lot of civilian casualties, but I think the Israelis, the reason that they sped up their use of this pager attack, instead of waiting for it in the midst of a ground invasion as they did when they invaded a few weeks or a month later, why they rushed to use it at that moment is because they thought the Radwan forces, the offensive forces of Hezbollah, were deploying and getting ready for the invasion of North Palestine. Okay, so they did that chaotic moment, which targeted the pagers, and then they went on a rampage of bombardment of the country and assassinations of the leadership of Hezbollah, the military wings. That's, again, a strategic mistake that it wasn't done, but maybe I think some people in Hezbollah right now think of it as a blessing that it happened not in the middle of the invasion by the Israelis, that the Israelis had to rush and use this card that they have in that moment where not everything, they were not on the ground. Imagine if Hezbollah fighters were directly engaged with the enemy when these pager attacks happened. Okay. Now, about Iran, yes, you look at how they had a chance before to destroy the air force and the air power of Israel in one blow, and they still do if they want to. But they're not doing it because they keep on playing this game of, we don't want to be the enemy. The enemy is conducting outright genocide, is directly occupying countries, directly changing demographics, directly even changing flags of countries and their whole composition of countries. And you want to be the example of international law and human rights and sovereignty. You can't play that game with such a vicious enemy.
Do you think it would have been different with Rouhani or if Soleimani was still alive? And if so, how?
Definitely it would be different if Soleimani was alive, because Hamas wouldn't have conducted this October 7th without informing Qasem Soleimani. That's for sure. The other thing is that we should understand that actually Israel also, quote unquote, the Zionist empire, that's what governed from Washington, D.C., actually also assassinated President Raisi of Iran. I wasn't a helicopter crash. They probably blew up either a pager on the helicopter and or a walkie-talkie on the helicopter. So it's Iran was, and because the Iranians couldn't prove it 100%, they had to broadcast themselves crying for a dead president and pretend that he just died by an accident. That again emboldened the Zionists. And when they went ahead and assassinated Haniya in Iran, in Tehran, on the day of the inauguration of the president that just came in, to tell the new president also, hey, we killed your one before you, and we killed now your presidential guest, and we could have killed you actually today on your inauguration day. The way that the West is playing this game, the Zionist empire is playing this game, is vicious to the max. And if you are not ready to fight on those terms, you're going to be mauled by this beast live on TV.
Yeah, I said Rouhani, I meant Raisi. Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I got to be honest. I've been shocked with the level of viciousness that Israel has enacted, and I don't want to call it weakness, but let's say a reticence by any other country to get involved in order to deal either with the isolation of the Palestinians, the amelioration of the Lebanese, meaning the outright attacks on Lebanon, or for that matter, the destruction of Syria. I got to be honest, I've been so much shocked at how this has turned out. From your point of view, do you think they're gearing up for an attack on Iran, even with the consequences of it? As you pointed out, any kind of major attack on Iran is going to be hell to pay, considering, shutting the Strait of Hormuz, attacks on Israel directly at that point because Iran has nothing to lose. Like, that seems to be a heavy lift. I mean, do you think they're really ready to make that lift? And I mean Washington and Israel in this case.
Yeah, I mean, the whole world watched genocide for 15 months, watched the destruction of Lebanon and Syria, and nothing happened.
Yeah.
I mean, not one Jewish person on this planet carried arms against Zionism. During the Holocaust of the Jewish people in Germany, 40 or 70,000 Germans carried arms against the Nazi regime. Yeah. I know we're seeing demonstrations and we see some Jewish people that call themselves anti-Zionist take a lot of media space that is critical of Israel. But what is that to me as a Palestinian or an Arab? I mean, in fact, I would say even if you're Jewish and Zionist and playing media, you're going to make a lot of money. And if you're Jewish and anti-Zionist and doing media work, you're also going to make a lot of money. So in my view, the anti-Zionist, whoever call themselves anti-Zionist Jews, are in a way very also responsible for what's happening. And they are not, they are guilty as the rest of the Jewish population in the world that is either participating in this genocide or doing nothing. During the slavery in the United States, you had John Brown.
Yeah.
You had white people carry arms against slavery, commit what we would call today terrorism against the state. Of course, there was the Black rebellions and so on. But I'm just saying, that we haven't seen such a thing in modern history, or in any history actually, that a whole people are um, uh,
Destroyed
accepting,
with the
yeah,
while we're
yeah,
watching. Yeah.
uh, and
It's
so,
it's that
and
part to me. It,
yes,
it's this idea that it's like we're seeing this, and it's day after day. I mean, there were nearly 100 Palestinians killed yesterday in bombing strikes, and it's like we just watch. And at a certain point, you almost get desensitized to it because it's happening so often, day after day after day, and you can see it on TV, on TikTok, on YouTube, on Instagram, on all of these networks, and it's like a televised genocide, which is kind of difficult to reconcile. I wouldn't look. I tell you this, based on my own values, I have a hard time accepting that the world accepts this, if that makes sense. Like I wouldn't have believed that the world would have accepted this in the way that it has operated, and yet here we are with the world accepting it day in and day out as it continues to happen. I mean, even the doctor recently, Sophia, I believe, the one they disappeared, where they apparently beat with an electric cord because of his resistance in attending to his patients up until the last minute and still putting out pleas for help, saying, "Look, I have patients. This is the last hospital in northern Gaza." They shook his hand. They forced him to walk out in the rubble and then beat him with an electrical cord after mocking him for not changing his clothes. Like, this is disgusting stuff that is being televised. It's just in the open. It's astonishing to me. Um, from your point of view, there's evidence at this point that Israel knew about October 7th and didn't do anything about it. And I guess looking back in hindsight, do you think that this was allowed with this idea of creating a casus belli for everything that we're seeing now? Basically, we are going to use this as our rationale. Let's just genocide outright. Meaning, how much do you think they knew about this? And do you think they allowed this to take place?
I don't think they knew, and I don't think they let it happen.
Mhm.
In fact, I would say Israel never needed an excuse to genocide Palestinian people, and they've done it many times. Many wars on Gaza over the last decade.
Not like this.
But it also, look, we should never think of, this is what the Israelis want and the Zionists in general, is if for everybody to think of them as all-seeing, omnipresent everywhere, able to, do whatever they want to, and they have control of everything. This is part of the propaganda. And unfortunately, the majority of people in the West have now adopted this positionality. In fact, I would say never in history of humanity have we seen a nation, a civilization, openly declare that they're less than others and than
Yes.
somebody else. Okay, every people's thought of themselves at some point that they are the best in the world, on the top of humanity, and some other people are less than them, some other nation.
Mhm.
Well, today, what we would call white people are declaring in mass media that the Jews are the chosen people, that they'd be fine with spending all their money of the economy and destroying their own country just to save the Jewish nation, right? There's a nice spider coming down.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. I saw him the first time, but I was
I
like, I
couldn't
was
figure
gonna
out.
wait.
I saw something out of my eye shot, and I couldn't figure out what it was. But yeah,
So this was a symbol of Israel, as Hassan Nasrallah would say, Israel is weaker than the spider's web. It
yeah.
looks scary, but it's very weak. And so no, I don't see them as all seeing like this. It was a huge shock to them. And they
Mhm.
lost the top 12 generals they had. I mean, people forget today what happened October 7th. On October 7th, around 3,000 Palestinian fighters crossed the gates of the ghetto, the extermination camp, and captured 12 Israeli bases, killing and or imprisoning 12 generals that led those. These were the elite units within the Israeli military. They also captured the Gaza SWAT team, basically elite of the police, their headquarters. And they also captured the Gaza units bases of the Shabak and the which is the military intelligence. So those were huge achievements and huge blows to the Israelis. And Israel had to immediately take in American generals to sit in their command and control center for the operations, because they didn't even have enough generals that had the expertise to conduct this war. And I would go even further than that. And I would say the Israeli military has been defeated. The ground forces of Israel were defeated long time ago in this battle on the ground. And although I doubt the numbers that the Israelis announce of their soldiers dead or wounded, I can say maybe they're half the truth, because in reality, there's every special force of every component of the empire that is active on the ground.
Yes, they are.
You remember that picture with Biden that
Yep.
got leaked by accident, and they got really pissed off, the American government, because the faces of the special forces soldiers were
On the ground.
visible. Yeah.
Yep.
And so the Canadian special forces are there, the German, French, Italian, everybody, above and beyond all the mercenaries. So if the Israelis are announcing, let's say, 5 Israeli soldiers dead today, maybe it's actually 10, and another 20 that are mercenaries and or special forces from other countries that are not announced their death. So
Yeah.
yeah, and the Air Force of Israel and its air prowess is also over exaggerated, because the day when they assassinated Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, they conducted 4,000 something air raids according to the Israelis. Well, Israel doesn't have enough jets to conduct such an attack. It has like 200 something jets,
Mhm.
and each one of them can carry maximum 5 missiles in best case scenario. And F-15s, F-16s, F-18s have to be grounded after 2 sorties for a week for mechanical. And F-35s have to be grounded immediately after each sortie for mechanical. So there's no way Israel conducted those air raids.
Yeah.
It was the Americans and the West conducting it, with them probably the Saudi and the Emirati and the Qatari and the Egyptians. Every asset that is in the disposal of the empire has been used over the last 15 years to try to defeat the axis of resistance as a whole, not only conduct the genocide in Gaza. So it doesn't feel like really like a win. I mean, nobody on this planet had, since World War II, had to face such a combined force.
No, I agree with you. I mean, because if you think about it, Israel can't, I mean, we paid 70% of all of this killing, death, everything else. It came out of us, meaning they couldn't do it on their own. And even when they were dealing with Iran, they couldn't deal with Iran on their own. I mean, it was clear at that point that the air defense and everything else, they were incapable of dealing with all of the crisis that they were facing. So no, I agree with you. It wasn't a situation where it's just Israel alone dealing with its own resources and everything else. Israel is getting help from pretty much all of these other countries in the West to do what they're doing, including financial, military assistance, intelligence, et cetera, et cetera. No, you're right. You're not wrong on this one. One last point. What is taking place on the ground right now in Lebanon? You were there. I'm not. You would have a better take of what's taking place around you. What is happening?
Well, there was a drone just now flying. You couldn't hear it obviously here, but I could hear it over Beirut, and the violations continue. The Lebanese military and the Lebanese government are doing nothing. They were supposed to be guaranteeing the protection of the country during this ceasefire.
That's right.
And because obviously it's a captured military and a captured government. This is the only reason you have a resistance group popping up, because it's not a sovereign country. And the negotiators are doing nothing, the French and the Americans, because it's their little bastard child, Israel. They will not do anything to stop it. We're all kind of, everybody I talk to is in kind of a waiting suspension moment. Everybody's waiting for the end of the 60 days. There's less than 20 somewhat days left in that 30 days. We'll see what happens. It's going to coincide basically with the coming of Trump. So you could see like the timing that was chosen by the Americans and Israelis to stop that war while they attack Syria, while they probably attack Yemen, and then Trump comes in, and then we will see what we will do with Lebanon. Okay, this is what the play from the West is, and everybody feels it here. Everybody's just waiting to the end of these 60 days to see what's going to happen. Most people expect a return to full hostilities. People are worried about the Wahhabi death squads being right now prepared to attack Lebanon, let's say, in such a situation where there's a return to hostilities with Israel. Because remember, yesterday or the day before, Al-Jolani, the terrorist in Damascus, in an interview, and his foreign affairs minister, another terrorist, in an interview about the situation in Syria, he said that they conducted this takeover of Damascus to avert a buildup of Iraqi popular mobilization units and Yemeni fighters in Iraq that was going to move into Syria in a full-out war and defend Syria from an invasion from Israel. So we took Damascus for them, and so they don't have to deal with the Iraqis and Yemenis and Iranians coming in a full-out regional war. And so maybe now they will try to invade Lebanon, these Wahhabi squads, while Hezbollah, let's say, is defending itself from an invasion from the south by Israel. That's like a vice grip on the country. And at that point, I think, people here are ready to, it's not going to be like the walk in the park in Syria that was starved for 15 years, that anybody, a soldier's salary was $15 a month, that you come and give him $20, he'll leave the checkpoint. So no, this is what everybody's preparing themselves for here in Lebanon.
Laith, man, thank you for this. I know it's a painful rundown of everything that's going on, especially since you live in the area. I got to be honest. My producer, Laith, is who I guess oriented me to paying attention to this. His family is in Syria, Lebanon. And when all of this took place, my first thing was hitting him up, asking him, is everything okay? How's your family doing? And as he pointed out, they're freaked out. They're deeply concerned about what is going to take place in Syria, and for that matter, what's taking place in Lebanon. So my heart goes out to you, man. Please continue to give us an update on what's taking place on the ground. I definitely appreciate your political analysis. And I'm going to say Happy New Year, despite the fact that things are not necessarily going all that great. Happy New Year, man.
Thank you. Have a nice day, Jamal. And
you too, man. Be safe. Laith Marouf, he is an award-winning multimedia producer, broadcaster, and law consultant. You can follow him. Laith, where can people find you, by the way?
You can find us on the website freepalestine.video, freepalestine.video, and there's all our social media links there. We're on something like 10 different platforms. Anything
Okay.
that you like, you'll find us on. And please donate. There's a lot of amazing content coming out from the ground in Lebanon, Jordan, and the West Bank.
Very cool, man. Thank you for this. By the way, one last question. What is going to happen to the West Bank? From my understanding, they were talking about effectively absorbing the West Bank. I don't know what that looks like or how that's even going to work.
Yeah,
What?
I mean, in my mind, the Israelis will be, if they are not stopped, they will totally genocide Gaza, and they will expel the Palestinians from the West Bank into Jordan. And people were like, but Jordan King is their buddy and so on. But he is there's a better useful idiot than the Jordan King, which is the Muslim Brotherhood, who
Yeah.
will be happy to do a Syria-style revolution to overthrow the king and absorb the Palestinian refugees and not fight Israel back.
They've tried to do that once before, though, right? Jordan, they tried to overthrow. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, like 60% of Jordan is Palestinian.
Yes, but the Palestinians that did the revolution in 1970, where the PFLP, secular, communist,
Right.
Arab unificationist, today the Muslim Brotherhood in Jordan is a sellout organization, as it is in Egypt, in Syria, and every other
I
part of
see.
the Arabic world. It's
Different animal.
it's
Yeah.
it's what Joseph Mas'ad would call Islam in liberalism. The Muslim Brotherhood is like the Christian Democrats in Germany. It's the Nazis, but they're Democrats.
But less so, yeah.
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. So this is what the Muslim Brotherhood was being, molded into. You have the full-out Nazis, the Wahhabis, and then you have the Muslim Democrats that are, but they're both fascist and they're both imperialist tools.
Laith, man, thank you for this. You have a good day, man. Be safe.
Bye-bye.
All right.